My name is Aljun. I've spent most of my life chasing things that other people fear to acknowledge. Ghost towns, cursed places, the unspeakable horrors that lurk in forgotten history. Some call me a journalist, others a fool. But to me, I'm just a man with an obsession that has taken me to the farthest reaches of the world in search of the unexplained. It started when I was 10 years old. My uncle disappeared without a trace. He was a fisherman, strong, healthy. One day he went out to sea and he never came back. His boat was found drifting near the shores of Samar, intact, untouched, like he had simply ceased to exist. My family spoke of it in hushed voices, dismissing it as an accident. But my grandmother, she knew something else. Late at night, I would hear her murmuring prayers, warning that they had taken him, that he had seen what he wasn't supposed to see. I didn't understand it then, but as I grew older, I learned about the stories, the legends, the city that shouldn't exist, and deep down I knew my uncle had seen it, maybe even entered it, and if there was even a sliver of truth to those whispers, I had to know for myself. So, I packed my bags, booked a flight to Samar. I told myself I was going there as a journalist, an investigator, but in reality I was just another fool drawn to the flame, a moth flying blindly into the dark. When I arrived in Cap Belogan, the air was thick with humidity, the kind that makes your clothes cling to your skin. The town itself was unremarkable. Busy streets, honking tricycles, street vendors selling everything from dried fish to knockoff sneakers. But beneath the ordinary there was something else, a quiet tension, a shadow lurking in the corners of people's eyes. I started asking questions, casual at first. "Have you ever heard of Biringan?" I'd ask. Some laughed it off, calling it an old wives' tale. Others, they didn't laugh at all. Their expressions darkened, voices lowered. "Don't ask about that place," an old woman warned me. "People who look for Biringan don't always come back the same." I pressed on, visiting small eateries and bars, buying drinks for fishermen and old-timers, hoping one of them would open up. Eventually, I met Manong Kanor, a frail old man with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much. He hesitated before speaking. "You really want to know?" he asked. I nodded. He leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "There was a man, my cousin, who saw it once. He was out at sea, not far from here, when he saw lights on the water. Not boats, not houses, something else. A city, glowing, beautiful. He swore it called to him, pulling him closer. Then, the lights vanished. He came back, but something in him was different. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak, just sat there staring at the sea. One night, he walked into the water. Never seen again." That story struck me harder than I expected. My uncle's disappearance had haunted me my entire life, but hearing Mang Kanor's words made something click. What if my uncle had seen those lights? What if that was why his boat was found empty? What if he too had walked into the water, pulled back by something unseen? I pulled out an old photograph from my wallet. It was the only picture I had of him, taken a few months before he vanished. I showed it to Mang Kanor. His eyes widened. "He was here," Mang Kanor muttered. "I remember him. He was asking the same questions you are." My blood turned cold. That meant he had been this close to finding the truth, and now here I was following in his footsteps. I found a fisherman willing to take me out at dawn. His name was Albert, and he didn't believe in Biringan. "Just a fucking stupid legend," he said, though his hands trembled slightly as he lit a cigarette. We drifted for hours, the sea stretching endlessly in all directions. Just as I was about to give up, my compass started spinning wildly. Then, the air changed. It felt heavy, electric, like a storm was about to break. The water stilled, turning glassy and black, and then we saw it. A city, towering buildings, sleek and modern, but ancient at the same time. Lights pulsed in unnatural hues, gold and violet, shifting like they were alive. It was beautiful, terrifyingly beautiful. "What the hell?" Albert muttered. His voice sounded distant, as if we weren't really there anymore. When I stepped onto the shore, the first thing I noticed was the light. It wasn't sunlight, yet everything shimmered as if bathed in a golden glow. The air smelled sweet, like rain-kissed orchids, and something else, something indescribable, like a fragrance forgotten by time itself. The city stretched before me, impossibly grand, rising into the sky like the work of gods. But it wasn't just the architecture, it was alive. The buildings weren't made of stone or steel. They shifted and breathed, their surfaces pulsating like living skin, shimmering between liquid gold and obsidian glass. Balconies extended and retracted like vines stretching toward the sky. Windows blinked, yes, blinked, like enormous eyes watching my every move. If you could take the magic of Encanto, the way Casita lived and responded to those within, and twist it into something more sentient, more knowing, more aware, that was what Biringan felt like. The streets sparkled with intricate patterns that shifted beneath my feet, like woven fabric constantly rearranging itself to lead me somewhere. Flowers the size of my head bloomed in swirling colors that didn't exist on Earth. Blues too deep, reds too vibrant, golds that glowed from within. And above me, there was no sun or moon, just an expanse of endless swirling twilight, illuminated by floating lanterns that moved of their own will. I wasn't alone. They stepped out of the shadows, emerging like ghosts made of silk. Their faces were flawless, too perfect to be human. Features sculpted like marble statues, their skin glowing faintly under the eternal twilight. Their eyes, though, were wrong. Not white and black, but entirely dark, like the depths of the ocean, vast and endless. And when they smiled, their teeth were just a little too sharp. "Welcome home," one of them said. A woman, tall and draped in flowing robes that shimmered like the night sky. Her voice was soft, hypnotic, but hollow, like an echo of something long forgotten. Home? I wasn't from here. I wasn't supposed to be here. The whispers of the city grow louder, overlapping voices speaking in unknown tongues. More of them gathered around me, moving in fluid, graceful motions like dancers gliding over water. They didn't walk, they floated, their feet barely touching the shifting ground. And though they spoke with kindness, I felt something beneath their words, something hungry. "You must be tired," the woman continued. "Come, you belong with us now." I tried to step back, but the street beneath me moved, guiding me forward. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body didn't respond. It was as if the city itself wanted me to stay. The woman held out her hand. I noticed then that her fingers were too long, her nails glinting like obsidian knives. "Stay with us," she whispered, tilting her head. "You were meant to be here." Then I saw it, a reflection in the shifting walls, a glimpse of myself, but not me. The version of me in the reflection smiled back, even though I wasn't smiling, and in that moment I knew. They were trying to replace me. I forced myself to move, tearing away from the invisible pull of the city. "I need to find someone," I said, my voice shaking. "A man who came here years ago, my uncle." The woman's expression shifted, not surprise, not confusion, amusement. "Ah, him," she smiled wider, showing too many teeth. "You're just like him, stubborn." The shadows shift, the buildings tremble. "Where is he?" I demanded. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned her head unnaturally fast, looking toward the towering palace at the city's center. "If you wish to see him, you must go there." I didn't trust her, but I had no choice. If my uncle was still here, if he was trapped, then I had to find him. And so I ran. Down streets that moved beneath my feet, past doorways that blinked as I passed, toward the palace where someone was waiting for me. Inside, the palace was nothing like I expected. It was alive. The walls pulsed like veins, glowing faintly with golden, moving light. The ceiling stretched infinitely upward, disappearing into an abyss of stars that should not exist. And in the center of it all, bound in chains of light, was a man, my uncle. His eyes snapped open. His face was hollow, his body thin, but it was him. And as I stepped closer, he struggled against his bindings, shaking his head violently. No, you shouldn't be here," he rasped. And then I heard it, a voice that was not my uncle's, a voice that came from everywhere and nowhere, crawling under my skin. My uncle's voice trembled as he looked at me, his wrists bound by golden chains that pulsed with light. "Jun," he whispered, "they're watching. They know why you're here." I stepped closer, heart pounding. "I came to bring you home." He flinched at the word home. "It's not that simple," he said, eyes darting to the shadows stretching across the chamber. "There's a choice, a test." The woman in black stepped forward, the same woman who greeted me at the city's edge. This time her expression was unreadable, cold, calculating. "You may leave if you wish," she said, gesturing to a long table that appeared from nowhere. Upon it were two bowls, one filled with pure white rice, the other with black grains that glowed faintly under the golden light. "One of these will set you free," she continued. "The other will keep you here, forever." I turned to my uncle. His face was pale, his lips dry. "Aljun," he rasped, "choose carefully. I made the wrong choice once." I stared at the bowls, my hands trembling. The black rice shimmered, almost hypnotic, like stars had been crushed into each grain. The white rice looked normal, plain and simple, too simple. My uncle's voice was barely a whisper. "They make the black rice look more enticing, but it's a trick. If you eat it, you stay." The woman smiled, tilting her head. "Do you not trust us, Aljun?" A flicker of movement in the corner of my eye, another reflection, one that smiled when I did not. "Aljun," my uncle gasped, urgency rising in his voice. "Eat the white rice!" My hands darted forward. I grabbed a handful of the white grains and shoved them into my mouth. As soon as I swallowed, the air shifted violently. The golden walls cracked, the floating lanterns shattered, and the people of Biringan, their perfect faces contorted, their dark eyes turning wild and predatory, began to scream. The moment I swallowed the white rice, something inside me snapped back into place. My body felt heavier, more real, like I had been weightless before without realizing it. My uncle, still shackled, groaned in pain. "Get us out of here," I yelled. The woman in black no longer smiled. Instead, her lips curled back in rage, revealing rows of jagged, shark-like teeth. "You were meant to stay," she hissed. The city shook violently, the once fluid buildings crumbling like glass. I grabbed my uncle's wrist, yanking at the golden chains, but they wouldn't budge. The woman stepped forward, her hands twisting into clawed tendrils. "You should have chosen differently." A deafening howl. The walls begin to close in, and the sky darkens. And then, a new voice cut through the void. A light pierced through the darkness, blinding and warm. The shadows screamed, recoiling as a familiar voice reached through the void.
"Aljun, Aljun, hold on."
I blinked. The world around me ripped apart, and suddenly I was back. Back in the real world. Back in my family's house in Samar, lying on a bamboo mat, surrounded by flickering candles. Soft murmurs of an old prayer, spoken in Waray. An old man dressed in white stood over me, the albulario, a healer, a shaman of old traditions. My mother knelt beside him, her face streaked with tears. "He's awake," she gasped. I tried to sit up, but my body felt weak, as if I had been gone for weeks. The old man, his eyes sharp and knowing, placed a hand over my forehead. "You were nearly lost," he said, his voice heavy with wisdom. "They almost had you." I turned to my mother. "My uncle, he's still there," I croaked. Tears welled in her eyes. She shook her head. "Aljun, your uncle disappeared 20 years ago. He never came back." No, that couldn't be right. I saw him. He was alive, trapped. I held his wrist. The albulario exhaled deeply. "What you saw was a shadow of what he once was. Some souls never truly leave Biringan." I felt something in my pocket. My fingers closed around a handful of white rice. Was it possible? Could he still be saved? That night, as I lay in bed, still weak, I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning. The white rice, the choice, had saved me. But my uncle was still there, and if there was even a chance of bringing him back, could I ignore it? I turned over, closing my eyes, willing myself to sleep. Then I heard it, directly beside my ear.
"You should have eaten the black rice."
I survived Biringan, but I don't think I ever truly left. And maybe one day I'll go back. Do you think I should? Should I try to bring my uncle home? Or should some places, some secrets remain buried forever? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you want more terrifying, mind-bending stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Forlorn Madness, where the line between reality and nightmares is never clear. Click that like button if you felt the chill and hit the notification bell, because there are more stories coming and you don't want to miss them. This is Forlorn Madness, and remember, some stories are more than just legends.